If he had shouted a bad word, would you have arrested him?
If those people are offended.
My understanding on this whole thing, it had to do with not only speech, but with language on the sign.
Are you familiar with the protections that the First Amendment provides citizens related to speech?
I know they have the right to free speech. If you're asking me the correct definition, then I'd have to say no. If I need to look at charges, then I go in there and open that book and I look to see what's in there that may fit that particular situation.
What are most tripods used for?
Well, sir, the tripods I'm used to seeing are ones that hold shop lights.
Do you think that anybody would ever use a shop light outside during the day?
I don't know.
I believe he had the legal obligation to answer questions.
If you understand law enforcement, we don't have the right to be offended.
How long have you been a police officer?
Roughly 17 years, sir.
Have you arrested a lot of people during that time?
I've arrested people during that time, but I couldn't tell you how many.
Could you provide an estimate?
I don't believe I could provide you with an accurate one. In 17 years, I would probably say an average of one a year. So at least 17.
What police departments have you worked for?
I've worked for the Cattle Mills Police Department, the Hunt County Sheriff's Office, and Royce City Police Department, and I'm currently employed by the Sunnyvale Police Department.
During your training before you became an active officer, did you receive any training related to constitutional rights of citizens?
Yes, sir. That was part of the academy training.
Did you receive First Amendment training?
I believe so. It was covered under the Constitution part of the academy.
Do you remember any details from that First Amendment training?
To be honest with you, sir, that was almost 17 years ago. I don't know that I could give you an exact on that, sir.
Did you receive any Second Amendment training during that training before you became an officer?
Yes, sir. There were multiple amendments of the Constitution covered during the academy.
Do you remember any specific details from the Second Amendment training?
Not off the top of my head, sir.
What about the Fourth Amendment?
No, sir.
After you became an active officer, have you received any training related to constitutional rights?
I've received so much training over my time as an officer. I can't tell you accurately if I have or I haven't.
Have you received any training related to the First Amendment since you became an officer?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Have you received any training related to the Fourth Amendment?
I don't know that I can give you an answer on that. I don't remember.
Do you believe that it's legal for you to arrest a person that you do not suspect of a crime?
I don't believe it's legal to arrest somebody if they've done nothing wrong. No, sir.
How do you know that?
Sir?
How do you know that it's not legal to arrest a person that you don't suspect of a crime?
If it's not a law or if it's not a law that's on the books that they have, if there's a law on the books and they violated it, then yes, they can be arrested for. But if there's not a law on the books and they've done something, I don't have a legal right to arrest them.
How do you know what laws are on the books?
We have the book called the Penal Code, the Traffic Code, Transportation Code. There are books that have all the laws that are active in the state of Texas, and then the laws that come up through the legislative process each couple of years.
Do you review those materials regularly?
I don't quite understand what you mean.
You've said that you know what laws are on the books because various government agencies release books of laws. Is that basically right?
Objection 4.
How do you know what's in those books?
If I need to look at charges, then I go in there and open that book and I look to see what's in there that may fit that particular situation. During the police academy, you're also trained on the majority of that, of the laws. They can't train you on every single piece, but they do train you.
Do you often arrest a person or participate in an arrest and then review the books of laws afterwards to figure out what they may have committed?
No, sir.
But do you regularly review the books?
I don't regularly open the book and read it if that's what you're asking for. No.
Are you familiar with the protections that the First Amendment provides citizens related to speech?
I know they have the right to free speech. If you're asking me the correct definition, then I'd have to say no.
Are you aware or familiar with the protections that the First Amendment provides journalists?
No, sir, I don't.
Do you think that journalists have the right to record law enforcement during regular law enforcement activities?
Yes, sir, I do, as long as they don't get in the way where it could pose a danger to themselves or others.
Have you ever been involved in an arrest where someone was arrested for something they said?
Other than this one that we're doing the deposition over, sir, not that I recall.
So this is the only arrest that you've ever been involved in where the person was arrested because of the content of their speech?
If you're talking about the content of their speech, sir, I still stand my answer, but my understanding on this whole thing, it had to do with not only speech, but with language on the sign. So if you're meaning that for both, then yes, that's the only one.
Have you ever been involved in the arrest of somebody that was recording something with a camera?
I do not remember.
So you can't remember any other time besides the arrest of Winston Noles where the person that was arrested was engaged in recording something with a camera at the time of the arrest?
That's correct. I'm sorry. Did you get my answer, Mr. Alexander?
Yes, but Miss Massey is more important than I. Do you think that people should be arrested for what they say?
I answered that before, and I believe I said no.
When you arrived, did you hear Winston Noles say anything to any bystanders?
At the time I arrived, no.
After you arrived, did you see the contents of Mr. Noles' signs?
No, sir, I did not. Not until after everything was done.
When you say everything was done, do you mean after he was arrested?
After he was detained and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle, it was shortly thereafter that I saw.
Before Winston Noles was arrested, did you see or hear him say anything to anyone?
No, sir.
How would you describe Noles' demeanor that day when you arrived on the scene?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me there.
Did he seem hostile to you?
He was never hostile towards me.
Did you see him behave in a hostile manner toward anyone?
Yes, sir. But you're asking me for an opinion on what hostile is. I may have a different opinion than you on what hostile is. I did observe him not being cooperative, if you want to say that's hostile. He was not being cooperative when officers approached him.
Do you think that Mr. Noles had a legal obligation to be cooperative?
Based on them investigating a report of what was going on, I believe he had the legal obligation to answer questions. Yes, sir.
Do you believe that citizens are legally required to assist law enforcement officers in investigations?
Can you restate the question?
Do you believe that the law says that Winston Noles had to cooperate with the officers?
I don't know that I can give you an answer on that. I believe that if an officer is investigating some sort of a crime and they're asking yourself or anyone else out in the public about that crime to gather enough information to find out if a crime's committed, then they have an obligation to answer.
And do you think a person who does not cooperate is hostile?
Objection form.
I don't know that I can answer that correctly, sir. I think it depends on their demeanor at the time.
I'm just asking for your opinion. That's all.
They have the ability to, yes, or do I think everyone? No.
So do you think that Winston Noles' lack of cooperation meant that he was hostile?
Objection for.
I believe that he was hostile in a way of not answering the questions. In the video, if I remember correctly, when officer spoke to him, he also turned his back to them in a manner which to me said he was being uncooperative and was not going to be cooperative at that point.
Do you think he deserved to be arrested for not being cooperative?
I don't have an answer for you, Mr. Alexander, because I was not the arresting officer, nor was I the officer that was doing the investigation into that situation at that time.
So if you weren't the arresting officer and you weren't performing the investigation, what was your role there?
I was basically a backup officer for officer safety.
Officer Short would then turn Otto's mounted camera away from the incident to protect his boss from having his disgusting behavior documented, while simultaneously depriving Otto of his rights to content gathering, including evidence of this crime that Officer Short was witnessing his supervisor commit.
I'm not being disorderly.
What are most tripods used for?
Objection for.
Well, sir, the tripods I'm used to seeing are ones that hold shop lights of some sort to light the area up or to light up the work area.
And so where are shop lights usually used?
I'm sorry, shop lights, is that what you're asking me?
Where are they most often used?
It could be outside in a construction area. It could be inside a building under construction. It could be multiple locations.
What is your experience with shop lights?
Other than using the one that I had when I was younger and doing work in my own garage or at my own residence.
When was the last time you used a shop light?
It's been multiple years because I no longer own one with a tripod setup.
Have you ever used a shop light outside?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever used a shop light outside during the day?
Not during the day, no.
Do you think that anybody would ever use a shop light outside during the day?
Objection for.
I don't know. I believe not, but I'm not everyone else.
Are shop lights used to light darkly lit areas?
Objection for.
I believe so, yes, sir.
So would you think it's unreasonable to need a shop light outside during the day?
Yes, sir.
Do you ever take pictures with a camera?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a phone with a camera feature?
Yes, sir, I do.
How often do you take photos with your phone?
I don't know that I would say once a day, but I've probably used it throughout the week. So to give you an accurate answer, I don't know. I use it throughout the week for different things.
Do you take over 500 photos a year?
I don't believe so.
Do you think it's safely over 200?
I don't think it's that much, sir, but I may be off a little.
Do you think it's over 100?
That's probably pretty accurate. Yes, sir.
Do you have any experience with other kinds of cameras other than a cell phone?
Well, I'm kind of old, so I've the old Instamatic cameras that you would mail in to get developed to all the way up to Canon AE1 cameras. And I have a little bit of experience with the newer 35 millimeter cameras that hold the digital cards in them. So I have taken pictures with various types of cameras, yes.
Did you see any light being emitted from the device on the tripod that day?
No, sir.
But you thought it was a shop light?
I believe it was a tripod for a shop light. I wasn't completely sure what it was.
Did you know that something was attached to the tripod?
All I saw was what looked like black plastic attached to the top half of it.
And what does your cell phone look like? Does it look like black plastic?
With the OtterBox cover on it, yes.
And if you saw a cell phone that was on a tripod recording, would it look like what you saw that day?
I don't believe so, sir.
Is that your cell phone and tripod? If it's not, I'm gonna leave it sitting here. If it is, I'm gonna take it and put it up so somebody doesn't steal it. But if you want to act this way, I'll leave it sitting here and let somebody steal it.
Why would you do that?
Okay.
You just said that a cell phone looks like black plastic. And if a cell phone is on a tripod, you don't think it looks like what you saw that day.
Objection.
What I'm explaining, sir, is what I saw attached to the upper half of that tripod. I could not give you an accurate answer if I thought that was a cell phone or not.
At what point did you find out what was on that tripod?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? Because I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Are you aware that the device on that tripod was a camera? Now,
No, sir, I was not. Not at the time. No.
Are you aware now?
I am now, yes, sir.
When did you learn that it was a camera?
I believe at the time that this whole legal proceeding started, which was over 2 years ago.
When you say legal proceeding, do you mean when the plaintiff filed his lawsuit?
Yes, sir.
Before you moved the tripod, did you consider confirming what was on it?
Can you explain to me what you mean by confirming what's on it, sir?
Do you think that it would have been reasonable to check what was on the tripod before you moved it?
Objection.
No, sir.
Did you think about checking to be sure what it was before you moved it?
No, sir.
Do you think that it would be unreasonable to check to confirm what it was before you moved it?
Are you asking for my personal opinion if I feel that way?
Yes.
It never hurts to check. But in this case, I did not.
Do you think that it was reasonable not to check?
I don't have an answer for you on that, sir.
Objection non-responsive. Do you think it was reasonable not to check the camera before you moved? Not to check what was on the tripod before you moved it?
Sir, when I stepped up next to it, I took a quick glance at it. Past that, my position was for officer safety. Taking a quick glance at it, my focus was now on what was going on in front of me, which was down, not the tripod.
Did you consider the possibility that the object on top of the tripod was a camera?
It never crossed my mind, no, sir.
Did you ever think about what it might be?
No, sir, I did not.
Why did you move the tripod that day?
To move it out of my way in case I needed to go in to help the two officers.
Why did you think you might need to help them?
Again, when it comes to backup or, officer safety, I wanted the clearest point to get directly to them if the individual decided to become combative with the other officers.
Did you think that there was an emergency?
Not at that point in time, but I'm not quite sure. Are you talking about at the point that I was standing there or when I moved the tripod?
When you moved the tripod?
Yes, sir, because if I remember from looking at the video, to refresh my memory, that was at the point that Mr. Noles, I believe, threw himself on the ground. So I wasn't sure what was going to transpire at that point.
I'm not being disorderly.
Okay. I'm not going to tell you again. All right?
I don't consent to any searches or seizures.
Okay. This is offensive to people that are driving by and families that are driving by.
Yes.
Yes, it's disorderly
What's
conduct.
the penal code?
It's disorderly conduct.
Can you read that to me?
It's disorderly conduct. You have your ID on you?
No,
Okay.
Now you're failing the ID.
I don't have my
Put your hands right here.
Why didn't you step around the tripod?
There was, if you look at the video, the ground, in the area, there's standing water and mud. I don't want to get muddy. I don't want to slip in the mud.
So you felt that that was the only choice that you could make in that moment?
To have a direct path to them, yes, sir. Or to have a better path so I didn't trip over the tripod, yes, sir.
Did you move closer to them after you moved the tripod?
Yes, sir.
Did you help them with the arrest after you moved the tripod?
No, sir.
Why did you move closer to them after you moved the tripod?
Because at the time, Mr. Noles had, I don't know if I'm going to use the right words, had thrown himself to the ground. And at one point, he started to either roll over or start flopping around. And that's why I moved in closer.
Do you think it was reasonable to move that tripod?
Yes, sir.
When you moved the tripod, did you see that this was a camera?
No, sir.
Did you look at what was on top of the tripod?
When I first walked up to it, yes, sir. I did.
But when you moved it, you did not.
Correct.
Did you see Dial slap the signs?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did he slap them hard?
Objection.
I can't, my definition of hard years may be completely different. The way I can answer that question for you is I believe he used enough force to get the signs out of Mr. Noles' hands. Now, whether that's hard, soft, or in between, I don't have an answer for you.
Do you think that Noles held the signs in a threatening manner?
I don't recall.
Why do you think Noles was arrested?
Objection.
Sir, I wasn't the arresting officer. I was not. I was there for safety for them. I didn't have any information on the reason why they were arresting him.
Have you reviewed the pleadings in this case?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by pleading.
The answer to the lawsuit?
I don't recall if I've read them, sir. I know I get information, but to give you an accurate answer, I do not recall.
Do you think that it's important that the facts present in the documents used to defend you are accurate?
Yes, sir.
please get my equipment.
That's not yours. Remember, I asked you earlier. Come on.
So you're gonna leave my shit on the side of the road. Get my equipment. Get my equipment. You dude, I'm asking for you to get my. Hey, I've committed no crime.
After Noles was arrested, what happened to the tripod?
I do not know, sir.
I want to turn this phone off.
I ain't turning nothing off. I'm gonna leave it right like that. Put it in evidence. I asked him if it was his. He didn't want to talk.
I heard it on.
Yeah.
Okay. You know where his car is.
Somewhere up there.
Are you talking about what happened to it as far as where it went? Or
I'm saying immediately after Noles was placed into the police car, what did the officers do with the tripod?
Objection.
I know at one point I collapsed the tripod, but other than that, it was handed back over to Officer Dial, or at the time Sergeant Dial. I don't know after that.
When you collapsed it, Were you gentle with it?
Objection form.
I collapsed it like I would a normal tripod. As far as if I'm using the wrong word, when it's expanded out, how you can raise or lower them, I collapsed it back down to the smallest size that you can make it. I don't know if I was hard or gentle at that point.
Did you have to touch the top of the tripod to do that?
I don't recall how I don't think I had to reach the top of it to do it.
But are you aware that tripods also extend upward?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And so to collapse one, you would probably need to hold the top of it and push it down to decrease the size of the tripod. Is that your understanding of tripods?
Objection form.
I think you could do it either way, sir.
When you collapsed the tripod, did you look at what was on top of it?
I don't recall.
Did you let the tripod fall to the ground after you collapsed it?
No, sir.
Did Officer Dial immediately take the tripod from you?
I believe I handed it to him, yes, sir.
Did he let it fall to the ground?
I don't recall.
Where did Officer Dial put the tripod?
Objection form.
I don't know, sir.
Was the tripod placed into evidence?
I don't know, because after I left the scene, I don't know what they did with all that stuff.
Do you know of the existence of a recording that would show what happened to that tripod after you handed it to Officer Dial?
Objection form.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again, sir?
Do you know of any recordings that might show where Officer Dial took that tripod?
I'm not aware of any, sir, or I have not seen any, if they exist.
Did you see Mr. Noles again after he was arrested that day?
Yes, sir, I did. Sometime after that date, yes, sir.
And could you describe that incident to me?
He was positioned across the street from the side entrance to the PD, holding a sign. As I pulled along that road to turn to pull into the backside of the PD, he was standing there and made an offensive gesture towards me.
What was that offensive gesture?
As you and I would know, he flipped me off, gave me the finger.
Why do you call that an offensive gesture?
Because most people that I know or I don't know how to explain it. Most people I know would find that offensive.
Was anyone else around when he made that gesture?
At the time, I don't know that I saw anybody else around, but I was driving my patrol car. There was no opposing traffic coming towards me. I couldn't tell you if there was anybody behind me or if there was anybody else on the sidewalk or anywhere near that side of that building that would have witnessed it. No.
Why didn't you arrest him for that?
I was trying to get to the PD to take care of something. So I just pulled in. First off, even though I may not like it, if you understand law enforcement, we don't have the right to be offended. So him flipping me off does not give me that authority to arrest him. So I just ignored him, pulled in, and walked into the PD.
If he had shouted a bad word, would you have arrested him?
What you're asking me
Objection form.
is that with, are you speaking that he's talking to me directly or without anybody else around or with other people around?
With other people around.
If those people are offended, then
And how would you
that possibility could exist, yes.
How would you know they were offended?
They would have to make a complaint. They would have to let me know they're offended by his language or his gestures.
So you're saying that if he had shouted a bad word and somebody told you that they were offended, you would have arrested him?
Objection form.
What I just said was that the possibility exists, yes, if they're willing to get me a written, if they're willing to give me a written affidavit that they were offended by his gestures or language. Yes, sir. Because that is a breach of the peace.
So if somebody called in a complaint and said that they saw that middle finger and they were offended, and you know he did the middle finger because you saw it, you would arrest him.
Objection, Paul.
You just asked me if somebody called. I would believe I would do a little bit more due diligence into who it is, where they were, how they saw it, before I make a determination on that.
And if you didn't have that diligence, would you hesitate to arrest?
Objection, Paul.
I couldn't give you an answer on that one. I don't just arrest somebody to arrest them. I make sure that I look at all the facts before I do.
Do you think that a reasonable officer would do diligence on the complaint that they receive from a caller?
Objection, Paul.
I would hope they do, but I'm not the other officer. I can only speak for what I would be able to do or what I'm capable of doing.
But you would do diligence before arresting a person?
Yes, sir. I would try to, yes, sir.
And could you tell me what would that diligence involve?
Objection, Paul.
Well, sir, in the scenario you just gave me, I just explained that I would ask questions to find out. Where were you? How did you see it? You know, there's multiple ways. It just depends on, it could be different questions for different scenarios or different situations.
So if you were holding up the finger and all you knew is that somebody had called in a complaint, therefore you didn't have the ability to do follow-up questions, would you arrest?
Objection, Paul.
No, sir.
Do you think that police officers have a duty to protect citizens from other officers violating their constitutional rights?
Objection, Paul.
Yes, sir.
If you had known that another officer on the scene that day was violating Noles' constitutional rights, would you have helped Noles?
Objection, Paul.
Sir, if I saw an officer violate somebody's rights, I would do what is right as a law enforcement officer, and I would do what I was sworn to do, which was to protect and uphold, which means yes, in answer to your question.
Did you see Dial slap Noles' signs?
You asked me that before. Yes, sir, I did.
How did you feel about that slap?
Objection, Paul.
I didn't have an opinion one way or the other on that, sir. I don't quite understand what you're asking.
I'm asking you if you thought it was appropriate for Dial to slap those signs in that moment.
Objection, Paul.
I did not hear the conversation between them at that point, so I don't feel it was unreasonable for him to slap the signs out of his hand.
Were you watching Noles the whole time you were on the scene?
Objection, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Did you see Noles take any aggressive action against anyone that day?
You're asking me for an opinion when your question about an aggressive stance. We could both have a different opinion of what an aggressive stance is.
I'm asking about your opinion.
Objection, Paul.
In what I saw when officers approached him and went to talk to him and he turned away from them, I believe could be constituted as an aggressive manner because you don't know what an individual is capable of doing when they turn away from you.
Do you think that turning away from the officers justifies Dial slapping those signs?
I don't have an answer for you.
Do Do you think that an officer providing backup during an arrest has a duty to intervene if the arresting officer is executing that arrest without reasonable suspicion of a crime?
Can you restate it one more time, sir? I think I understand what you want, but or what you're asking, but I'd like you to restate it just to make sure.
If you're performing backup during an arrest, do you think that officers generally have an obligation to assist the person being arrested if they're being arrested without reasonable suspicion of a crime?
Objection, form.
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Do you think it's reasonable for an officer that's providing backup to intervene in that situation?
Yes, sir. I believe if they recognize that it's something wrong like you're stating, then yes, they should be intervening.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. I think we're all done.
Reserve our questions till trial.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. It was a pleasure.
I'm asking you, if you go outside your house in a public place with a lot of people around and you shout, "Fuck this city, fuck everything, fuck the government," should I be arrested?
There would be circumstances where you would take somebody in custody to avoid inciting a riot or having that person potentially be attacked.
What if the sign said "Blue Lives Matter"?
How is Blue Lives? There's nothing vulgar about Blue Lives Matter. There's no profanity in Blue Lives Matter.
Are you saying that if the sign said "Blue Lives Matter," Noles would not have been arrested?
I'm telling you that based on the complaints that we received that day, a guy telling me that he was offended by the profanity and vulgar that was being used in the signs.
Objection, non-responsive. If Noles said "fuck the draft," would you have arrested him?
Directly to me or to
anyone?
If they were offended about it, yes.